Wait, I don't have a full setup to like show their cams and stuff, so I'm gonna have to draw them.
You 4200, you could do weapon and trinket. 5400, you could do weapon and both trinkets. I think.
All right.
This week, and then.
Pete. And Dorki.
Growl's name is Pete? It's a good picture. It's a good picture.
Wait, it looks like... Okay, I wrote the plus weird. It looks like Mountain Talk. I'm calling it up.
Hello, Tess.
Hello.
Yo, what up? Where the hell's James at?
I don't know. I told him to... Oh, so I don't know if you guys noticed about him. This is... Oh, I was about to... Okay, I'm still going to talk shit. Do you know that he streams... Okay, so even when he has 2 monitors, he plays WoW and his Discord and his stream chat is under his WoW and he has to alt-tab to read either of them.
Sometimes I pull the stream chat off to the other monitor, but I always leave the Discord on the main monitor.
Dude, that is like, dude, like streamer or just gamer 101 is like second monitor is whatever Twitch stream or Twitch chat you're looking at and your Discord. That's like a that's a thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I got too used to it, and then I feel like if I'm like looking over at the other monitor all the time, then
oh, if you do it for focus reasons, that's fine. But that sounds like copium. It just sounds like you've done it for a long time and you just still do it because of that.
I am averse to change.
All right, cool. So I wanted to talk to you guys because I was talking about Mythic Plus stuff and I haven't like done Mythic Plus in a while. So I wanted to hear some Mythic Pluser takes and kind of give you guys an opportunity to like speak on it and maybe they can hear that and make changes. Because I don't know if you guys saw it since you were doing Mythic Plus. Actually, you guys might have been in a key, but Ian actually posted like a clarification on the stuff that got translated from that French interview yesterday. And then Hazelnutty also interviewed him and he mentioned it at the end when he had the opportunity to talk about something he's passionate about, and that's what he chose to talk about. So clearly he likes it a lot. It wasn't like a main expansion feature, but clearly they're going along the lines of this season 4 experimentation, which I think it's not even rotating anything out in season 4, right? It's just adding 2 new dungeons. So it's kind of be like there's gonna be like a ton of keys, right?
This season 4 or the next?
No, like season 4 of Shadowlands. Like
yeah. So my understanding is they're taking away all of the keys.
Yeah, except
so
for
they're
Tazavesh.
only so all they have is Tazavesh, the 2, then the Mega Dungeon from BFA Mechagon, then the Mega Dungeon from Legion, and then
oh shit, I didn't even know that.
Yes.
Okay.
So they seem to really like this not too many dungeons thing. So I think it seemed like an opportunity for them to add more dungeons and not remove them, but they chose to remove them, which is interesting. But yeah, it's only 8 dungeons next season as well.
I'm gonna turn them all up, chat. First of all, how do you guys feel about that? I feel like it's a cool, fresh thing, at least for raiding. Like the idea of like not like they're not okay. Obviously, like another raid would be better, but like Mythic Plus is not used to the like oh well, it's not like an option for Mythic Plus. Like oh, would you like 8 new dungeons? You'd all be like yeah, but like that's not like a thing for Mythic Plus. But I think it's actually really sick that it looks like they're doing like a weekly rotation and going back through all the raids, and they're at least trying to make the old content relevant. And they're doing the same thing with Mythic Plus, is just like older things. So I mean, I haven't heard too much from the Mythic Plus community, but before we talk about the next expansion, like, do you guys feel cool about season 4? Like, you think that's gonna be fun?
I think it will be for me personally because I didn't really get a chance to do Mechagon or the Legion Big Dungeon or the WoD one. So for me, like getting to experience it, it'll basically be like a new dungeon. But for players that played those dungeons, I could see how they wouldn't be a fan of it, and I don't think I would be a fan of it if I had already played them before as well.
Really? Even if they're that long ago? Like I think like Growl, I guess, started like very recently, right? Like I think I found that out the other day. Yeah, you're like
baby.
Yeah, you're like super new. But like I feel like even okay, so like I did dungeons like super hard and like Mop Wad and like a bit of Legion, not a lot of Legion, like a bit of Legion. And if they brought back like pretty much any of those, I feel like there's enough time. Like as long as they're not bringing back Shadowlands dungeons, I still feel like it's cool. Like I could see like Mechagon going back and doing Mechagon. That sounds lame, right? Because I mean, you guys can probably still remember doing Mechagon. I mean, would you rather do Halls of Atonement and X Dungeon for another season than go back and do Mechagon with it being a year and a half removed?
I think the important thing for me is the variety. I actually don't really mind BFA dungeons, and if they brought them back, as long as it's calculated, like for instance, what they did in season 4, 2 dungeons only for 1 season, and then we're chilling, right? As long as it's not like, okay, well, here's this dungeon in for the whole expansion. But I actually don't mind more recent dungeons. And we were talking about this a little bit. So they were talking about bringing back old dungeons. And I'm a little worried that some of the less modern dungeons are not going to be very good for Mythic Plus. And I feel like the benefit of the newer dungeons is that they are more modern and they take less catch-up work. Whereas if they bring back something from Mop or something from like Wrath or something like that, like who knows, that could be a total mess in terms of like just
because
you know,
the biggest
you
thing
can
is a lot of
elaborate.
these modern dungeons are tuned around M plus. They're like designed for M plus. Whereas if you look back into some of the older dungeons where there's like a lot more RP going on, there's just like a lot more downtime and boring parts.
Really?
Trash basically does nothing for the most part.
I feel
Yeah,
like like
Go on.
specifically Mop and Wad are they weren't made for Mythic Plus. That's true, and I think like it'll take maybe some work for them to make it. Like I definitely agree that like it's possible. It's like season 1, 4 old dungeons, and then like 2 months into it, people are like, "Yo, these 4 dungeons are kind of whack. Like it's not good." Like I could see that being the case, but there are like those dungeons were made for challenge modes though. And
those are a little bit more modern. I was talking more along.
Oh, you're talking Giga old.
Or
but I don't think they're gonna
Kata
do
or
that because I feel like dungeons, even as far back as like Kata, if any of you guys played then, like those dungeons were almost not comparable to anything from BC or Wrath. They were already like they had a lot more going on. In fact, Kata had like some of the like hardest dungeons like right when the expansion came out, because back then that was the only time they were difficult. There was never like a later mode that made them more like that. I think it could be really good, and I think the main thing is like loot. It's like fuck, I'm really bad at interviews or like hosting these kind of things because you want to spread it around. There's at least 3 like extremely deep topics about this. But I think like the first one would just be the one thing you guys want as Mythic Plusers, if I were to guess, and I actually talked about this a bit earlier, and I think Growl reacted to me, like I made a video like kind of talking about like Mythic Plusers just need more dungeons. Like it's really hard to kind of compare to Raid, but I think the end goal, if it's possible, would be this. Just every single Mythic Plus season, you're doing 8 new dungeons, whether they are like within the theme dragon dungeons every single season. I think all of us see that as probably unfeasible and would never happen. So obviously you'd have to take shortcuts to get there, which I guess it takes less time clearly from them suggesting this to optimize old dungeons as it is to just create 8 new ones. I wonder how, like, is that like what you guys want, or do you guys actually think there's a lot of validity into keeping a lot of the dungeons around?
Well, for me, I think that like as far as season 4 goes, I think it's a really cool idea, and I think it's going to be exciting and it'll be fun, I guess, in general. But as far as the next expansion goes, like I see their vision, I guess, but part of me feels like it might be better that this is more of like a later into the expansion idea, like a season 2 idea. Because the thing is, like, if you're going to go into the next expansion and you have all this new content and you're going to get to experience it in M0, like players will go through in M0, and then it's going to be like, you know, oh man, I wish we could do this in M+, and based on, it's going to be tough, right? Because imagine if the only 4 Shadowlands dungeons that you could do right now were The Other Side, Spires of Ascension, Theaters of Pain, and like Sanguine Depths. Like that would not be a fun M+ season if those were your only 4 dungeons.
What the hell? Sanguine's the best dungeon in Shadowlands.
No, okay, that's Bear Tank talking.
Wait,
so,
really? You don't like Sanguine? Oh man,
dude, I just hate getting one shot by the Raging Scribes.
This kind of got brought up to them yesterday. There was like a decent amount of conversation going on a channel, and I think what people landed on was, man, wouldn't it really, really suck if you were doing, you know, the first season of next expansion, so you have 4 dragon dungeons and 4 old ones, and one of the dragon ones, you know, they stumble upon, you know, whatever X dungeon you guys consider one of the best dungeons you've ever done, or just like a fucking insanely good dungeon. It would really suck to be going up until the beginning of next season and thinking like, man, we might not see this dungeon again for the rest of this expansion, or at least another couple seasons, and that fucking blows. So you would want at least to have some kind of agency, right? Where do you guys think there should be some kind of like community voting on what things are being rotated out or being kept?
I would say yes, but then like after seeing the whole Grimrail Depot thing,
yeah,
I think what people want in this game is vastly different.
Here's
like
the
I
thing
think
about
the average
community
player.
voting. They should just listen to us and not the community. Like the community's dumb. Just listen, get like a council of like people that play the game and like understand, like that have a reach into the community, but not necessarily like. I feel like for instance, people talking about Sanguine Depths not being a good dungeon. Like, man, Sanguine has some of the best designed bosses, like some of the most interesting stuff. Like, I feel like that's such a great dungeon. And then at the same time, like people like really like Halls, but then all right, all you guys who say that you love Halls of Atonement, like in this week you're gonna go into Halls and you're just gonna blow up in the first pull to like raging bolts and like everything because none of your teammates like interrupt. Like, I feel like I don't know. I do agree that they should listen to the community, but I feel like they should like I don't know about like doing a Twitter poll to determine what we play.
No,
for
not a
6
Twitter
months.
poll.
Well,
Not
you,
a Twitter
you know
poll.
what I mean? Though? Like imagine
Yeah,
if like think about your idea of like well-designed raid bosses, and then imagine if they did a Twitter poll or like, oh, let's do an Instagram vote for what raid bosses will be in the next tier. You'd just be like, whoa, hold on, like,
Yeah.
But I get it. Yeah, I do think they should listen more, and yeah, that was definitely in that conversation talking about the dungeons. It's like it's hard because I like what they're doing. Anyway, we also strayed very far away from talking about season 4, by the way.
That's that. Yeah, welcome to my stream.
As React content creators that we both are now, you know, we just have to. You know, we have to learn to talk for sometimes 1 hour, 2 hour. We have to fill a whole stream with absolutely nothing. So that's fine to stray off course, wander back.
Amen. What do you think, James?
I think listening to the community in general is good, but I do feel like there are some staples that come from each expansion that for the most part, most players will be completely fine with having those in the rotation for the entirety of the expansion just because they're such great dungeons. And I think to just kick them off like out at the end of the season just because like that's what you normally do and you want to like keep it the same every like the dungeons don't have to go if they're a great dungeon. I think
so. The rotation of
disagree.
Well, so that you're basically saying the rotation of dungeons is just a system to remove ones that are not fun and keep ones that are. So basically, you'd rather do, if it meant doing the same dungeons for 2 things in a row, if all of them happen to be just fucking bangers, just like really good, that's better than doing 8 brand new dungeons and they're mediocre. Not even bad. They're just not like.
I don't think it's like as black or white as that. Like I don't think you would keep all 8 or get rid of all 8. Like a little bit of variety is good, right? Because I just think like for example, I didn't really play BFA much, but everybody talks about how they loved Freehold, right? Well, imagine you have season 1. You have Freehold, it's this great, like, you're like, oh my god, I love this dungeon, and then they're just like, alright, we're getting rid of it. Like, hope you had fun for the last 6 months with that one. You know what, it just feels a bit odd, I guess.
Well, I think, so if you've ever played like a RTS game, which are basically extinct, I'm showing my age here, but basically the way an RTS, like a game with maps is, imagine here's a season, right?
Showing his age. Chad, doesn't he seem young?
Or whatever. Yeah, CSGO, right?
He seems young,
so now,
right?
going into the next season, what do the developers do? They look at the maps or the dungeons that people didn't like, they get those out of there, they bring in either brand new maps, brand new dungeons that they've developed, or they bring back old favorites, and who knows, maybe they even tune those a little bit and change them to fix them. And the way I sort of envision the best situation for Mythic Plus is like, okay, there's a pool of dungeons. My ideal number is like 10 to 12. That might intimidate people. That might be a little bit, you know, a lot of them. But let's say every single season they take 3 or 4 dungeons out of the rotation, whether they're new dungeons or old dungeons, the ones, and preferably the ones that maybe people didn't like or that had tuning issues. They remove those, they bring in either new ones that they develop or old favorites, and they just keep doing that season after season after season. And so every single, you know, patch, the Mythic Plusers or people who just do dungeons can look and see, okay, well, here's the rotation. Oh, nice. These were my favorite dungeons. They kept, here's these dungeons I didn't really like, they removed, and here's the new ones that are brought in. And that's sort of what I see. I feel like they're doing it a little bit like more black and white, where it's like, okay, we're doing totally 4 old dungeons and we're hiding some of our new dungeons and stuff. I feel like it should be a lot more of a streamlined process. That's at least what I envision.
What do you think, Dorky?
I would say like the biggest thing they would need to take away is to figure out which dungeons exactly. I mean, it's sort of like off the topic a little bit, but I feel like they should focus on what exactly makes some of these dungeons good. And I think a large part is just having dungeons that are shorter, because we don't have the attention span to be doing a 40 fucking minute long dungeon like the other side or 100%. King's Rest.
Yeah, I kind of, without too much knowledge on it, because I haven't done them this expansion, but I feel like when I used to do dungeons. It's almost objective. Like I feel like a 3 boss short dungeon, which we don't get a ton, but like sub 30 minutes, sub 25 minutes, those are objectively more fun than a 40-minute dungeon. Like, and you can bump up the difficulty too. You use the same argument in raid bosses. You say like, dude, pretty much outside of like a couple end bosses or like near the end of the raid,
I hate those so much.
almost anyone would prefer just like a 6-minute, like Rygalon, right? Just like a 6-minute absolute fucking banger. Like you're almost dead the entire time. It's super hard and it's like super tight. You'd take that over like a 12-minute, not even a snoozer, but even just a 12-minute fight that isn't an end boss. It's just like, that's just fucking too long, man. Like, it's probably the same argument for dungeons.
Yeah, I mean, dungeons are just like too dense, right? Like, so I bring up the idea of having 12 different dungeons, and while it might seem intimidating, it's like, well, let's also sort of thin out. You know, we don't need 4 different mechanics that everybody needs to know in every single trash pack and every single boss. Like, let's start designing some dungeons that are a little bit more bite-sized than like, okay, it's maybe a 25 to 30-minute experience, even for like a prog level of difficulty. And maybe, you know, we don't need every single boss or every single, you know, part of the reason you play a dungeon is because you want to just nuke down a bunch of trash, right? There's no reason to have all these complicated mobs in every dungeon. Like, they can develop the exact same number of mobs, the exact same number of bosses in an 8 dungeon, you know, like what they did in this expansion, but spread them out a little bit, you know, just make these, you know, we don't, like, imagine if Sanguine Depths just ended at the 3rd boss. Like, I don't even think anyone would hate that. Like, that would be a really fun dungeon, actually, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and then let's take that whole gauntlet idea and put it into a whole nother dungeon with a few other parts, you know, like the very end of Spires or something, because that's a really long dungeon, or one of the Wings of DOS. Like, I'm not saying, like, you know, make everything super complicated, and, you know, I think if anything, the amount of stuff that people need to learn in Mythic Plus is way too high, and they need to like thin that stuff out.
Well, I mean, also when you're saying 12 dungeons, I think people aren't listening to the other part of it. The important part with having a rotation with more dungeons involved, that people would have a totally different reaction to that if their baseline experience with the dungeon was 20 to 30% on average shorter. It's just thinking of having a few of those be like a King's Rest tier long ass dungeon, it just sounds bad.
I think the other part of it as well, that like, because there were 12 dungeons in BFA, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, and for the most part, most of the people I've talked to have said that they didn't mind having 12 dungeons in BFA, because it didn't feel as bad, because you only had to do 1 week's worth of keys. But now, having to play keys on Tyrannical and Fortified, people feel like they're obligated to play on twice as many weeks. And so even though right now we only have 10 dungeons, it feels like a lot, because the way the community views it's more like 20 dungeons. So I think that's another reason why a lot of people might be opposed to the 12 dungeon idea. But like, yeah, if a lot of the dungeons were 25 minutes, I feel like that would be such a big improvement. Because then if you were under time, like, you might even finish that dungeon in 17 minutes, or, you know, something like that. That's way better than sitting in DOS for like 45 minutes.
You're looking at it from a really high level perspective. You know, you're talking about like people who are trying to push on both Tyrannical and Fortified.
Well, not even push for like rank. I mean, there are a lot of people.
Well,
that
yeah, but
get,
not exactly like pushing high ranks. Yeah, because I mean, there are a lot of people who are fine with learning these dungeons. It's when there's too many dungeons for them to learn. Especially if you're like a tank player, for example. I've got a lot of tank players who come into my chat and they're like, fuck, man, I have to learn the routes for all these different dungeons. I gotta learn what all these mobs do. Like, that part can get overwhelming. And I feel like what would really help is just cutting down on the dungeons. There's just way too much dead time. People need to figure out all the different skips, what exactly these mobs do.
It's kind of a double-edged sword too, because I think at least for a lot of the community that I identify with, like I like, not the people who are like new to it and learning it, is I think people really like the dungeon that's thrown in every expansion that isn't exactly linear. And there's like I have a Shara or a Taldazar where like kind of throughout the expansion things evolve and people actually find those optimizations to go somewhere else first than they haven't previously. But that kind of rubs against what you're saying, where you have to figure out all the strats and things are constantly changing. So it's like kind of finding a line between innovating and having things be repeatable and learnable. Because there has to be an ecosystem, right? Just like in raiding, with raiding being pretty popular and like the Race World First brings in a lot of eyes. But the reason that there's eyes is that people have done it before, and that there's a lot of, you know, guilds that are raiding at a lower level that are just doing it for fun, right? And Mythic Plus needs that too. Mythic Plus can't just have an ecosystem of high key pushers. It needs to have a bunch of people, not even just for the stream community, but just the community of the game. Like, it needs to have a lot of people that are willing to and actually feel like progression within their group of doing these dungeons over and over again. And it's not weird and convoluted like what you're talking about. So I think it's just a generally good thing for the mode. I kind of want to talk about affixes in a bit, because I've kind of been off of that for a while, but I do want to kind of ask you guys one question. And I don't know if like my take on this is just like super bong cloud because I haven't played in a while, but my take back when BFA clearly, so from Legion to BFA, obviously Legion was the first Mythic Plus iteration. It was also really good. I don't think all of you played that. I think only 2 of you, maybe just Dorki. Did you play in Legion, Dorki?
Yeah.
Okay. It was really, really sick. And then BFA clearly made an effort to make trash packs more of like a thought process. And that carried into Shadowlands where, you know, you weren't just gonna be able to just like kind of pull everything. You needed to like figure it out. And I thought that novelty wore off really fast. And through the course of the expansion, people felt like they wanted to just kind of pull everything and shred. And areas that kind of didn't let you do that because you had to like, you know, make sure you kick these couple of casts. And if you have too many of these casters, you get blasted. And where do you guys stand on where the game is now with that and what it used to be and like where the right spot for that actually is?
So I played both Legion and BFA, right? And I could see a lot of fun in why people really enjoyed Legion because you literally just pulled an entire quarter or some shit and kite the entire pack. But I feel like that gets boring really quick. It's definitely really fun at first. It's like literally what got me into doing M+. Because I was just grinding out legendaries and we're just doing +2 mob souls, pulling everything, healing everything down, and that was really fun. But I feel like the fun starts to wear off, and for us at least, higher end players, it's a little bit more fun when you're trying to do all these complicated pulls, the setups, and like worrying about all these different kicks and stops. I do think Shadowlands was a little bit too extreme. I feel like there's got to be a little bit of in between, where you're pulling a bunch of mobs, but you're still worrying about mechanics. Because Legion was on the other side, where you actually didn't do anything at all. You would group up all the mobs, press all your buttons, AoE stops, Blood Elves, and just run away. But
Yeah.
BFA, that's where I felt like BFA was pretty fun. Because BFA, you had Freehold, for example. Freehold, there were still mechanics you had to worry about. But for the most part, you can mass pull. Shadowlands is probably the worst example. Like, this is the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where you would actually just have to do one mob at a time because you couldn't pull more than it.
Okay, so it's kind yeah. So basically, you've now seen two entire ends of the spectrum with BFA kind of being in the middle. So it's kind of like where it needs to go from there. I agree with the kite. I think everyone would agree, especially people who have tanked. That's primarily what I did. Like kiting is, I think it's objectively bad, right? Like having to kite for necrotic, having to kite because you're mass pulling. Like kiting is always bad. If you're ever kiting, you should just make tanks stronger to where they can do their damage and stay in the raid or stay in the group. Like kiting just is not fun for 20% of your group every time you're doing that. But where do you, the rest of you, I guess, James or Growl, think about where we should go from here now that we've gone from mass pull everything and just blast and have a lot more thought?
So for me, like if it's a spectrum, I would like it to be slightly less mechanic heavy than it is right now. And like for my example for this, like if you're thinking about like Gambit, which is the new most recent dungeon, like on these pulls where
James is a DPS player.
You group up like you group up these murlocs, right? And one guy does something that enrages them, another one makes it so they like heal forever. Like in my opinion, and they run away, which is a nightmare to deal with. Like that is already enough. But then you add in the fact that there's like all these casters everywhere, and like it's just like I think you could just do away with the casters, and it would still be fun. Like it would be good. And I don't know. Yeah, I think if they just made it so if you wanted to pull 3 packs together and there was only 3 things to worry about, that would be great. But like sometimes you want to pull 3 things together and then all of a sudden there's 10 things to worry about, and it like I don't even know how a pug would do it. Like the cast is like 1 second long. I don't know. Yeah, a little bit less than right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with way less. I feel like also a lot of the problem is the types of mechanics as well. Like, I think it would be a little bit more interesting if, okay, there's a lot of mechanics, but most of the mechanics are, like, clearly telegraphed frontals and maybe some swirlies or some get out of melee, so it feels more fair. So, oh, I pulled a lot of stuff, and, oh, this is chaos. Like, I need to really dodge, and, like, maybe I'm not doing damage. But the problem with some of the mechanics is, like, you have mobs, like, for example, the Goliath in Spires, where if you pull this mob, it requires 2 different players to be rotating kicks back and forth the entire time. And it's like, well... like, how am I even supposed to pay attention to anything else that's going on when literally this is the cast, right? If it goes off, it just blows up your entire party. That's just the cast. And it's just like, well, this doesn't, like, for instance, the pack before the first boss Inspires has that Goliath, which has two people need to kick that one mob. Then there's another caster which has a lot of really deadly stuff, and then on top of that there's a guy who heals, and there's a guy who has a frontal, and it's like there's just so much chaos going on in this pull. But also it's like you need to have the knowledge to know what all of these abilities do, and what happens. You need to have a bunch of weak auras and a bunch of UI mods to find everything and see what's going on. And it's like I feel like I don't mind necessarily mechanics, but like let's make some of the mechanics like very clearly telegraphed, and like things that, well, it's not necessarily just kicks. Like I feel like when it comes to interrupts, it sort of feels like they're artificially just stopping you from pulling more. They're just saying, well, okay, we're gonna put so many interrupts in this pack that you can't possibly pull anymore because you just don't have the interrupts. Where I feel like they should at least give you the choice of, well, let's just try and pull more packs together. It might be chaos, it might be not good, but let's not just instantly kill the team for trying to pull a lot of stuff together.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Oh yeah, mechanics where it requires communication between two people, I really am not a fan of those in general. Like if it's like in one singular pack, like, because even with the Goliath, sometimes when you watch players that do high keys, like it gets hectic, and then you overlap kicks, and that one overlap kick, and you instantly wipe. And it's like, how are players that are just getting into the game, that aren't in voice communications, like how are they expected to like just know and perfectly rotate kicks with each other? And yeah,
the way you deal with that is you make the cast not as deadly or less impactful, or you make basically our interrupts a good source of difficulty. The reason there's more interrupts now and why there's more just things that have difficulties, they clearly want every trash pull to be more than just a bunch of mobs you just AoE down, which is fine. And also the reason that interrupts weren't as big of a problem earlier is because Arcane Torrent existed, right? Like, I mean, that was like maybe something that hasn't been talked about enough, is like they probably maybe swung the needle too far when they removed Arcane Arcane Torrent, and then also increasing kicks that matter, that it maybe swung it too far. Or like what do you think is like the best form of difficulty?
I was just thinking a pack that I really like is the
dude, why did I say Arcane Doodle, chat?
Because there's like a big frontal, and then there's like a bunch
maybe
of
I'm hungry
swirlies on the ground, and if you overlap kicks, yeah, maybe in like the keys that we do, it's a big deal, but like in almost every key level, it doesn't matter if you overlap kicks. And there's just like, you just have to like, it's personal responsibility, right? You dodge the stuff on the ground, you dodge the frontal. There's quite a few mobs. There's like 6-7 mobs. There's like one important one. Like that's pretty good, right? I'm a fan of that type of pack compared to the pack Inspires, for sure.
Yeah, the most important thing is definitely to have more filler mobs. That's probably the best way of putting them.
Yeah.
Like that's something that Legion did really well, is just having a bunch of these mobs that just beat on your tank and they don't really do anything else.
Do you think that those should be mixed in with other mobs? Like basically, it sounds like there's two ends of the spectrum. It's like a bunch of filler mobs that don't matter, and then there's pulls that just have like 5 guys that matter. Is the play to have more? Maybe you could even find a few examples from this, not now, but like just for Blizzard to be like, yo, this is a pack that's great. It has some filler mobs that don't matter, and it has like this 1 guy or 2 guys that are important. And the pulls that are not, you could basically just look through every dungeon and be like, the pulls that are really not fun here are the ones where like, this is cool, the whole dungeon, and then like you get to this pull where like 5 guys matter, and it's like really slow and counterintuitive, and it feels weird. And then just kind of show them a good middle ground for that.
Yeah, well, it's funny when you say show them examples. So there's a mob in Sanguine Depths that had a pool that it would drop under it. It was the Visages or whatever. And the pool just did way too much damage. It was way too fast. They decided it wasn't fair. They removed it. And now that mob doesn't do anything. It just attacks. And Dorki made the point, like, I think this is actually the only mob in the entire expansion in any dungeon that only attacks. Every single mob and every single has a mechanic, right?
Wait, really?
Every single
Think about it, guys.
So seriously, even like
I've never even thought of that.
Even like a single little gremlin that's like just in a pack, that guy's gonna have like a debuff he puts on the tank or something.
Yep,
so
yellow
yeah,
mobs.
like Hall Zero fucking bonk your tank. Just do half.
Dude, that's actually insane. I'm certainly that's on purpose, but like that is so different than the last time I did Mythic Plus. I would argue that in Legion, what do you think? Do you think 60 to 70% of the mobs didn't do anything outside of like
Well,
maybe a?
to be fair, Legion was a little bit different because you can just kite it all and they stopped doing mechanics. 'Cause they
Oh,
wanna run
true.
after
Even
the
if they,
tank.
yeah, it was like 20 or
Yeah,
30 yards or
yeah.
something, they would just run and not do anything. But like even in BFA, I would say, what do you think? Well, probably 10 to 20% of the mobs in BFA just attacked you, like, or
Well,
a few in every
A
pack.
weird thing that they added in BFA was we sort of call it like a fervent strike in the community because that's one of the abilities
Oh,
they
yeah.
use in BFA. Was essentially it's a tank mechanic where it'll always hit the tank if the tank is nearby, but if the tank is trying to run away, it's just gonna hit some random guy. And while I don't necessarily dislike it, I feel like that's another thing that's pretty poorly understood or telegraphed, especially for like, you know, these are like big tank hits that will kill you in like a 14 or a 15 or like, you know, a mythic 0 if you're under geared maybe. And it's like, well, these things are like people don't even understand. Like people will come into our chats who have played the game the whole expansion and be like, why, like, am I losing threat? What's happening here? And it's like, well, this is an ability and it's, you know, it's here for that reason, but it's just not really telegraphed or understood.
Well, it's pretty much here because
Because of
everyone
the kiting
kited.
in Legion, right?
Yeah, everyone kited,
Exactly.
and they were like, yeah, imagine fucking kiting now. I still, and I would wonder, I kind of wanted to talk about like tanking individually later and just kind of get your takes on it, but I feel like that's one of the things they should do with design is just make it so you are incentivized as a tank pretty much at all times to just be in range. Either if you're in range, you do like ramping more damage, or like just for whatever reason, like leaving the mobs for the sake of survival is just bad. And they can incentivize that in a bunch of different ways, but fervent strikes are not one of them. I can tell you, trying to pull that first left pull in a Taldazar with the MDI route, the like 10-minute Atal, and trying to group those ads without it ferventing DPS was actually maddening. That made me so fucking mad.
Yeah, right. As a tank, you don't fully understand, right? Like you just like I think it's just the point I'm trying to get at, I guess, is just the level of complexity is just a little bit too high all across the board, and especially for things that tanks have to do because tanking is already like a really tough job, and there needs to be more tanks doing dungeons. And I feel like so many people are intimidated from tanking new dungeons just because of all these things, and it's like, well, you know, maybe some of these we either need to like show it, you know, like what if the tank is out of range, the mob like turns red for a couple seconds, and then if the tank doesn't come back in, then it swings at somebody, right? Like I feel like there's just a lot of like telegraphing or like knowledge stuff that can be better conveyed.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people figured out when they went to Final Fantasy is it's like, look, I didn't play Final Fantasy, I'm not going to, but like the telegraphing and the way the mechanics worked in that game seemed pretty intuitive for a lot of people who didn't even play the game before.
Especially new
And-
players.
Yeah, exactly, right. And people have been playing WoW for however many years, and they're still confused about what's going on, what's happening to them in dungeons.
Yeah, you should never have anything kill you and you be confused, right? That should just never happen. Before
exactly.
before we talk about each individual role, though, I do want to bring up one thing. This is actually usually the main point of conversation about anything in Mythic Plus, actually, and that is affixes, and probably splitting it up into talking about tyrannical and fortified alone, the other affixes alone, and the seasonal affixes probably finally, because I think the seasonal affixes are really interesting now. Let's actually probably start there. I want to know like how you guys feel about them. I know some have obviously been really good and some haven't, but I wonder if seasonal affixes will even be a thing next expansion. Because like I think seasonal affixes were designed to make the dungeons you're doing all expansion differ a little bit every season and be more interesting. It's not really under any other reason than that. But with them coming out with basically a new dungeon set every season that they want to, doesn't that kind of remove the need for seasonal affixes? So I just kind of want to let you guys talk about those for a bit.
Yeah, that's definitely a take. I didn't consider that if the dungeon rotation is changing so much. I feel like in general they're going in a good direction with seasonal affixes, and their whole goal with them is, well, it changes the way that you play the dungeon. The problem is, and I think they hit it perfectly this season in terms of change the way that you play the dungeon, but don't make them a nuisance. Don't make it feel like every single dungeon that I go in is like I'm struggling with this thing. I think Prideful kind of felt like that, where it was cool at first. It was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like thinking about 20% counts, having to deal with this mob. What do I do with this buff? But then, you know, even if you didn't really play dungeons too much, you kind of got real sick of it real fast. And in Pugs, it was really tough. And again, it's a mechanic that's tough on tanks. But yeah, I do feel like they could probably get rid of them. And yeah, I do think that affixes in general need to be looked at quite a bit.
I am a fan for sure of the seasonal affix, and I'm not exactly sure if I like fortified and tyrannical or not. Like if I try and imagine myself thinking about the game from the majority of the player base's view, I definitely hate tyrannical doing high keys because I think it's just not like the purpose of M plus, right? Like we come in here to have fun and like kill 10 mobs and do like a ton of DPS, and then you're doing single target combat, which is basically raiding, but you're in like AOE talents, and you didn't really sign up to go like, I don't know. It's kind of crazy. It scales out of control, and I'd be fine if they did away with personally if they did away with every single affix except the seasonal affix. Like I think the seasonal affix this season is really really good because you gain damage from it. It feels like fun to do. It's not like a big hassle to deal with. It's pretty intuitive.
That's actually crazy because I have like very like secondhand Mythic Plus knowledge because I barely ever talk about it on stream, and I'm sure a lot of people in my chat actually do it because I think most people who PvE a lot in WoW do a lot of Mythic Plus in general. But I always get so like I feel like the Mythic Plus community never takes a second to actually like review an affix. They're very quick to say if it's really good or if it's dog shit. Because like I remember like right after it came out on the PTR, I heard some people saying some pretty good things about it. I'm like, yo guys, how's the new Mythic Plus affix? It's bad. It fucking sucks. It's terrible.
Well, that's people in general.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Oh, especially WoW fans. But
yeah, it's bad.
But like it actually seems really fun. Do you guys ever pick more than just the main one? I don't know how like what the variety is on it, but it seems really cool.
What do you mean by the main one?
Like do you guys
yeah.
always kill the same one or do you
No.
Okay, then that's
No.
fucking great then that's exactly what they're going for. That's fucking dope.
There is one that we never kill, which is a bit sad.
That's fine. Even if you renamed or remade the mechanic right now and it was just between picking the two that you do and you like it, then that would be fine.
Yeah,
it sucks that there's a third one that doesn't make it for whatever reason, but the fact that there's even two and that's enough to change your gameplay and like it, then that's good. Wait, what does the one do that you don't use?
It gives you 15% haste, but it's
That's
just
bad? It's probably not high enough.
Complete hassle to kill is the main problem.
Yeah, I
Oh.
actually don't think it's too bad. So basically, you have Woe, which gives you a move speed buff, and Invis doesn't help you at all in combat. It gives you a little bit of DR, but not really. Then you have the two other ones that help your damage. One gives you a haste buff for 60 seconds.
And then
one
the
gives
CDR
you a
guy.
huge CDR
Yeah.
for 10 seconds. I will say, I'll actually disagree that you never kill the 60-second one simply because it's the 60-second one. Let's say you're finishing a pack. It's like, well, do you really take the 10-second CDR one when the pack is over? I think like...
When do you plan on killing Vi in any of the keys you've done this season? Where you're like, oh yeah, we're killing Vi here. Oh yeah.
We talk about it. I don't know, what does Dorki think? I think
Very
Vi is...
tech.
I think all three of them are. You definitely. Here's the thing about is it adds damage. It's easy to kill. Therefore, that's the one you're gonna go for most of the time. But I think there's a time and place for both of the other two.
There could be a place for the haste one. I just haven't. I haven't seen a group, and I haven't myself been like put it in the route. Like, oh yeah, we're killing Vi here.
Don't
Like,
worry, you'll probably see it later down the line.
Yeah, it could be there somewhere.
You just you aren't advanced enough yet, James.
That is
Yeah.
someday.
Wait, so do you use it to like invis past shit basically? Just
Oh
like
yeah, all the
really?
time.
That's
in
fucking
DOS,
dope,
right?
dude.
Think about the other side, right? How much running there is. Sometimes we'll use it literally just to run. Because you run so fast through the corridors. Like we'll go to a corridor,
save more
for
time like
instance,
that.
the Ardenweald area. We'll clear it out. We'll get a bunch of trash. Like we'll actually use it twice. So what we did in a key today, we used the speed buff invis. Then we ran all the way through the whole wing to the boss, just so we could use our lust and get it off cooldown. Then we cleared out the area. Then when we were done, we killed another one just so we could book it out of there. So
That's
actually,
fucking
the
sick.
speed one is really cool.
So would you at least from just before we get off seasonals and kind of talk about the other ones, I wonder if that's a trend that they should realize is that like Awakening was really, really well liked too. And that also involved having the option to, be kind of like skip some shit with the Awakening portals. And that just having clearly having damage investment is good. So like clearly that one gives you damage. The one in the season 1 of Shadowlands gave you damage. But like the 20%, do you guys think the 20% ones are bad? So like I think Reaping was pretty well liked, and I'm not sure about the season 1, but I feel like routing your entire dungeon around making sure you're hitting 20% thresholds gets kind of weird. And also talk about something that's probably like really annoying for new players, like Dorki was talking about with routing, right? Like that sounds like the pinnacle of shit being annoying.
I think
Yeah, it's a very big deal.
I think like one thing is that part of the reason why Awakened and the seasonal affix this season is so cool is because we're like imagining new ways to do the dungeon after having done the same 8 dungeons for like a year and a half. However, if they do what they're planning on doing in the next expansion, where they're rotating new dungeons all the time, I I do like the element of choice.
I
but
think it
I
should
don't-
still happen though, because like
it
it would
could.
just make every new dungeon you do more innovative and more fun and more different. That's basically they
Yeah.
turned seasonal affixes from annoying bullshit. Like I could probably name a few of them, like especially the first one of BFA, and like where it's just like this is just a pain. I don't like doing dungeons because this exists, and it seems like the ones they've made, they've been able to actually capture. When you do this, it actually just makes the dungeons more interesting. And if they can ever do that, it should always be in dungeons because that's just objectively better.
Yeah, I think the ones where you have a choice are for sure better than the ones where you don't. 100%.
All right, fuck yeah, you guys have like totally.
Well,
Okay,
it's
I
not
think
just
seasonal
that
affixes
too.
down.
Yeah, so it's like the term borrowed power. Like a lot of people just use these words and they're like, oh,
I'm
when they're
mad.
thinking about it, they're like, oh fuck, man, borrowed powers. I hate that shit.
Oh, I'm mad.
Seasonal
Systems too.
affix. Oh my god, yeah. Like all these words, they just like trigger something in people's minds without thinking about the benefits of them. I think the biggest thing with seasonal affix is they need to reward you rather than punish you, because half the time when you're thinking about all these seasonal affixes, you're thinking about how you can skip them. Like Prideful, how do we skip Prideful? The one last season,
Yeah, the last
Tormented,
season,
we
right?
wanted to, yeah, like we try to skip as many Tormented as possible, but this is the first season in a while where we actively want to be seeking out these relics. We actually want to be killing these relics for once instead of trying to skip as many of them as possible. And instead of just punishing the player for dealing with these affixes, we just need affixes that will reward the players.
Fuck
Because
yeah.
a lot of times people look at these affixes and they're like, oh man, I'm gonna have to deal with this. Instead, they're like, oh shit, yo, let's try to get this affix.
Yeah, it was like kind of also accomplished with Awakening, but the only reason you ever really wanted to do it outside of skipping something was just so you didn't have to deal with it on the boss. But I think that's also a thing about affixes in general that are fine, is that having the choice to deal with them earlier rather than later and just having it be more efficient and being able to cleave it down. I think all of those, at least MDI, can't speak about high keys at all, but at least like MDI stuff, the option to do that was really cool. And I think those were two of the most liked seasonal affixes ever, right? It had to be Awakened in the current one.
I would
Yeah,
say so.
definitely.
I think, yeah. I don't know. I guess this season is like, it's still pretty early because we haven't, you know what I mean, compared to Awaken, which is like a whole expansion ago. So, but currently I'm enjoying this one a lot. I think a lot of people like Reaping too. I think the big difference between Reaping and Prideful is just simply how impactful it was. You know, let's say you're doing a weekly pug and, you know, maybe your tank doesn't know the count of every single mob and you spawn a Pride in the middle of a pack. It's
Yeah,
like, well, you
20%
might just
sucks.
die. Right,
Yeah.
like you might just die, right? But Reaping, it's like, well, not only do the mobs not do too much, but they kind of like bled in slowly, and it felt like you weren't as punished for making a mistake. And I feel like that was where Reaping went right and where Prideful went wrong.
Well, Reaping was also weird that it was also kind of kiss curse. Like it did actually help you, but only if you were like one spec in the entire game being on Holy
Yeah.
DK. So like
Yeah.
it was like that was like probably poorly balanced because of that. But I really do think that, at least in my small experience of doing, I did actually played a shitload in the Reaping season, but I just think 20% stuff is just bad. It just doesn't seem good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, stuff that slows you on the last boss or on any boss, the stuff that slows you in general should be permabanned forever.
Stop slowing me, man. I don't know
Yeah.
why they do this. I don't know who is in game development that thinks that a good mechanic is slowing you, but corruption slow and the last affix of where you don't make my character slow. I don't know who I have to write a letter to or what email I need to send. Stop making my character slow. It's not fun. It's not good. Don't do that.
Because the dungeons in general this season are so much more fun just because you're not slow on the last boss. If nothing else changes, like, but you know what I mean? If they're going to do Kiss Curse, don't do it slow.
All right, fuck yeah. Tyrannical and Fortified. A year later, so this has kind of been a little contentious because I remember a lot of the community, specifically high-end community, is the only like really vocal one that's like, man, fuck. It's been Tyrannical a lot of times. And it's just like the argument is like, man, I'm not even gonna do keys this week, and they mean like key pushing for IO. But then I heard from Blizzard that they were like, yo, our metrics for, you know, how much keys people are doing between Tyrannical and Fortified doesn't really change. But then after that, I think they nerfed Tyrannical. So now after that, how have those two played out? Do you think they actually benefit the game to have something that is like changing the difficulty of whether it's bosses or trash going into a new expansion, especially considering your all suggestion of maybe having less bosses and shorter dungeons in general? Like what is the state of Tyrannical and Fortified? Should it still be in the game?
I feel like this, out of everything that we've talked about, I've seen some people talking about, oh, it's a higher player problem or whatever, or it's only for like the top X%. I sort of I think my opinion is different from a lot of other key pushers in that I think it's definitely a high key problem. I think if you're a casual person, or maybe you're just doing 15 to 20 range, which 20 is like pretty good. I wouldn't even call that casual. I think Tyrannical and Fortified is pretty well balanced right now, and it makes the dungeons feel different from week to week, in the sense that you have to think about, well, do I cool down this pack? Do I save it for this boss? And I would say the average player and the average consumer of WoW content likes Tyrannical and Fortified, but
dude, there's no way.
All right. Dorky's a man of the people, so he knows it better. But
it's not
I
even
will
that,
say
man.
that
It's so boring. Look, people don't like doing a boss for 4 minutes straight. Like, think about the first boss in Myst.
Yeah, but you don't do a boss for 4 minutes straight
screen.
in 15.
Yeah,
like in a 15
you
to 16
you would.
key.
I'm pretty sure they do. I'm pretty sure.
All right, type 1 in the chat if you think
look,
you
if
do
you
a
guys do
4-minute boss in
keys.
a 15 key. You guys all
first boss Myst.
Everyone in my chat don't listen, because all you guys do 25 plus high, 3.5k IO, but in all the other chats,
you can't tell me the first boss of Myst doesn't take like 4 minutes long. You just beating on the goddamn.
Okay, so I guess
beating on the target dummy.
A lot of
if
ones,
I
man.
Target dummies, I would go to Orgrimmar.
Jeez, I'm not saying I like it per se, but I'm saying I think maybe this is a weird healer take. It does make the few areas where you get to shine as a healer is like, oh, this is a boss that does a lot of damage, and like you make it through with your team, and it's like the feeling of, oh, if we kill this boss, we can do the dungeon. So maybe it's a healer take, but the way I thought about it is I feel like it's probably enhances the experience for the average player, and so I don't think they're going to remove it, but it does feel like a pretty big problem for anybody who likes Mythic Plus and wants to push high keys, because very quickly, like Dorky said, the boss fights go to like 4 or 5 minutes. So yeah, if people at 15s don't like it, if everyone's saying I do 15s and I don't like Tyrannical, then get rid of it, because who's it for?
I feel like if you were to have Tyrannical or Fortified in rating, now keep in mind this is kind of weird because trash just doesn't fucking matter, but I feel like it would make it extreme. The fact that Tyrannical ever existed would make it really hard for raid bosses to ever be made well, because you'd have to make them so they're killable both on Tyrannical and non-Tyrannical weeks, and you'd just end up having a shit boss. I feel like there might be a little bit of that in dungeons, where is it possible that if Tyrannical didn't exist, they could make all these bosses way more interesting, and like you're saying, as a healer, way harder and way shorter, and still have the same level of difficulty? It's just that you don't have to tune a boss that can be potentially extremely boring on Fortified weeks, and then on Tyrannical weeks it's just boring but longer, or it's hard. I guess it's hard because of that, especially for healers. But does that kind of convolute the whole process of boss design, that you having to tune it for 2 different total things kind of makes it so it's just bland?
I feel like they don't care about dungeon bosses nearly as much as raid bosses. I feel like what happens is the Tyrannical bosses in dungeons just at a high level just one-shot you, Like imagine if in Mythic Raid, a raid-wide mechanic would just one-shot everyone, and you literally had to have Devo or else you would die, which I guess was something
that happens all the time
in Prague, right? Which is, I guess, you know what I mean? But it feels like they, it's not designed for the plus 29s, and I don't necessarily say that it has to, but yeah, I agree with you in the sense that I feel like it would make the game better if they did do that, but I don't know that they do that.
If they were 100% set on keeping Fortified and Tyrannical in the affix pool, I feel like in general they should just stop the affix scaling at a set key level, so it increases difficulty for the majority of the player base that's going for KSM or whatever, but then it stops being a bother and they don't have to worry about it so much as the keys continue to scale. Because some they did that with bursting, for example, because it was just too hard to deal with bursting, because it kept the amount of bursting damage kept scaling up as you scaled up the key level, so they just capped it out. And I feel like one example of one that doesn't is Spiteful. Spiteful just keeps getting infinitely stronger, and it just gets so annoying. It gets to the point where you just get this thing spawns, it turns around and hits you, and you instantly die. It hits you for 80,000 damage, and it's just that's not really fun for anybody. And it would really easily be solved by just capping it out at a certain level, and it would be the exact same for 99% of players that wouldn't even notice, right? And I don't know. I feel like in general they should just take that approach, and you wouldn't see the effects so much of bosses taking too long. In the last,
Well, I think one thing to expand on that idea, so something that Asmongold talked about on stream is like, okay, think about the average 15 key, right? How many people struggle with getting into a freaking 15 key? Like, you have way enough gear, you've done 15 keys before, but it's like, it's just tough to get into keys. Like, people decline you, like, everything's so competitive. And a lot of the reason could be that, like, well, every single Mythic Plus sort of has the same rules, whether you're in a plus 15 or a plus 30. And it's like, well, the idea of maybe separating keys and sort of like having a breakpoint where the average person who either is a casual Mythic Plus enjoyer or just doesn't even want to be in Mythic Plus and is only there for the gear, maybe have a different set of rules for them. Like, what if maybe keys didn't deplete until you get past 15, or maybe different sort of scaling or affix rules? I feel like there's also the room for that to sort of make the casual experience for the person who's doing dungeons, even if they don't necessarily want to like push high keys, different. And then also, hey, what if we change around the scaling, or sort of like give a little bit of attention to the higher key stuff too, and then kind of give the best of both worlds, almost sort of like the way heroic and or normal and Mythic Raid works, right? Like Mythic, it's not like the difference between heroic and Mythic Raid is like, oh well, let's just crank the numbers up and then send it. Like you actually
No,
like,
they're designed for different people.
yeah, right, exactly. And I feel like that sort of idea would be cool in Mythic Plus too. The problem is just the amount of
This is a
people
really
that play
fucking good
Mythic
take.
Plus versus Raid. It's hard to justify doing that, like giving it that much attention. I love it, and personally the whole reason I got into streaming is because I have so much fun playing Mythic Plus with my friends, and I think that other people would get into it too if they saw how much fun it was. But at the same time, like, it is sort of a smaller corner of WoW, and it's like, would they really give it that much attention?
Well, I think
don't
they
know.
should. I don't think it's a small
Yeah, I
corner
don't
of
think-
WoW,
I-
by the way.
It
is not a small corner. There's
to give it way more attention.
No, there's
Put out
a-
way more
dude,
dungeons,
dude, I'm
make
pretty-
everyone do it. Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure Mythic Plus is like extremely prevalent with people who play do endgame content at all. Like it's just really easy to get into. But like I think you're right. They are designing Mythic Plus to basically, after level 10, which is very low, to just be a totally linear. Actually, I don't even know if there's even a level 10 extra affix anymore. I might be making that up.
There is. It's a
Oh,
seasonal.
okay. Yeah, like it is very linear, but that's not actually how the community is. It's like there's like two levels. There's like people pushing high keys, and then there's people doing 15s, and the middle of that is people, I guess, trying to reach up to that point, and that's fine. But like, I think you're completely right. It also kind of goes into what JPC's saying, where those affixes are meant to scale, but maybe the way they scale from 10 to 15, 10 to 18 is good. But after you start doing keys above 25, some of them start becoming just linearly more difficult and start becoming bullshit. So capping them out or making them scale differently at a higher level, or just changing the way affixes affect people who do Mythic Plus keys at like an extremely high level could definitely be a very good thing. So basically that kind of just brings me to like the general affixes that exist, because you mentioned Spiteful and a couple other things, but like, do you guys like... This has been something that's talked about since affixes, where like people have said like, yo, just fucking remove affixes and this would be good. I don't know if that was ever the right thing to do, or make them all kiss curse or whatever, but that's like really complicated. Where do you guys feel about with affixes in general?
I think Dorki has a really good take on affixes. He like completely converted, so I'll just let him talk about what he thinks about it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've been talking about this for a while. Well, actually, I was just talking about it with my stream. I remember Alismir made a post talking about like how he feels about affixes, and I feel like the best way to approach affix would be similar to how we have encrypted at the moment, where you are rewarded for doing the affix, and it would make people excited to do an affix. Like, let's say, for example, inspiring. That's the affix where you have one mob that is inspired, and it makes all the mobs around them unable to be CC'd. That is like one of the worst affixes at the moment, and it's really not fun to play. But one way to make it fun is, what if you made it so that if you killed the inspiring mob, it would demoralize all the mobs around them, making them take like 50% more damage or some shit. So like, imagine all the different possibilities you can do with these affixes. You would look forward to playing these affixes. You can like go into a week and be like, oh man, it's inspiring week. We can try this pull where we can beat down this inspiring mob, pull a bunch of mobs into it, hop that inspiring mob, and just blow all your cooldowns. That sounds really fun. Or like, what about Sanguine, the affix where it heals the mobs? What if it drops a Sanguine puddle? 10 seconds in, it becomes a black puddle that damages the mobs. So like, you're incentivized to do the affix. You kite the mobs out, the puddle changes, and then you drag the mobs back in. And instead of like healing all the mobs, you can actually use it to your advantage. And I feel like there's just a lot of ways they can make these affixes fun instead of punishing and feeling like a chore. Because nobody wants to do affixes like necrotic. Like, it's like you go into a week. I have people always asking me every week. They're like, "Yo, so is this week affixes good? Can I actually log into the game now?" And half the time I'm like, "No, it's not that good. I mean, look, it's playable. You should probably still play the game, but yeah, it's not very good."
Yeah, I mean, any
I feel like
affix,
this should also,
Yeah.
yeah.
like any affix like necrotic, just think about that. Like it's fundamentally designed to have your tank kite basically. Like there's ways around it and they've nerfed it. But like for a long time, it was like, how could you design an affix that basically forced your tank that week to like not play the game? You just like
Right,
run
but,
away
like,
from.
Hear me out.
That's
Hear me
crazy.
out, okay. So necrotic, it works the same way as it does now, but as soon as your necrotic stacks end, as a tank, you gain a damage and healing buff based off of how many stacks you had when it resets. So you go in, you get 50 stacks, you pop all your cooldowns, then you run away, which, you know, you don't feel great about running away, but when that buff ends, you get 50% or 100% increased damage. You just go back in and slam all those mobs, and it's like, okay, well, it's still necrotic, like you're still doing what you're supposed to do with necrotic, but it's like, okay, now it's like, this is fun, like this is what I can do on necrotic, instead of like, oh no, I have to do this. It's like, I can do this now. And I feel like that's how they should try and approach affixes in the future.
Yeah.
It takes, again, a lot of love and care to do. Like, it's not easy to think about all these ideas and implement all them, but and it should be like every single affix is like, oh, what can I do this week, as opposed to like Dorky said, it's a chore. What do I have to do this week?
Yeah, and it also fixes two problems in one, because I think tanking is a role that's like extremely important in dungeons. I imagine it's probably one of the hardest, if not like the most important role, just in dungeons specifically. And a lot of people don't tank dungeons. A lot of people who tank in this game as their primary thing don't tank Mythic Plus, and I think that also would solve that problem. Where pretty sure if you start making tanks just universally just beat the shit out of stuff, you'll see a lot more people tanking. Like if you had if you had affixes that were making tanks just do damn, you'd have people be playing tank more than they do now.
Oh yeah, this season too. Yeah, like all the tanks who are gaining their 4 sets, especially blood DKs, they're actually like slamming, doing more single target than some DPS players. That's fun for tanks.
Yep. I mean, the most fun time there was to tank in this game is unquestionably a Mist of Pandaria, when tanks were just doing way more damage than everyone else. That would, I mean, it was just turns out doing a ton of damage and probably healing is is objectively more fun than not doing that. So after affixes, unless any of you guys have some more affix takes, so you guys are saying you like affixes, just make them use the seasonal affix.
Oh no, we don't like the
thing.
current affixes. Well, I do
Yeah.
feel like affixes are a requirement because I mean, James probably knows. Like when we play beta keys or PTR keys, it's literally just fortified only. We don't have any other affixes, and it can get boring pretty quick if you're just doing same keys over and over and over, and there's no affixes. Like I know people have brought up the whole remove affixes. I feel like that's just not the way. We just have to make them fun.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you're doing repeatable content, you can't remove something that makes the content more like you have to change the content, and that's the only reason affixes ever existed, and that still exists now, where how you do a pull one week, you should be trying to change the way, at least change the way you think about doing that same pull next week, and that's just fundamentally what affixes are designed to do. You just want them to be more fun. Makes sense. You can accomplish all of that by thinking about like, oh, what cool shit can we do this week on that same pull you're thinking about, versus like, oh, how hard are we gonna get fucked this week because this affix is worse than the other one. You know what I mean? It's like it should just be changing the way you think about it.
The thing I think too that could be like encouraging for developers is it would just take that upfront investment to like get them all good, and then you'd be set, right? Like you wouldn't need to touch them. They just need that little look to. Growl said it. You know, it takes love and care to get it right, I guess. But once you have it, it would be super fun.
Are there any affixes in the game right now that are beyond redemption? No kiss curse, get the fuck rid of it.
I don't know how you would change bolster.
Storming.
I was thinking about that, and I also, this might be a personal opinion. I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm not the biggest fan of dealing with affixes using class utility. Like, I don't personally like bringing Rogue only because it's Raging Week and Rogue is our suit.
Oh yeah, it's
Or
bad.
I don't like bringing Priest only, or like playing Dwarf on Alliance on Tournament Realm only because it's bursting. I'm not a fan of that. but like other affixes, there's no class involvement really. I mean, like some tanks are better at dealing with like Tyrannic or Necrotic, I guess, but just like in general, I don't know. That's just my opinion on those.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Evade about this a lot because from my perspective, I'm like, well, class buffs should be good, right? Like, why wouldn't you like class buffs? But the problem is, like, let's say you're a DPS player. If you're brought to a raid or a dungeon, you want to be brought to there because you're doing huge damn. Like, you want to be, you're that's why you're a DPS player. You don't want to be brought because you're a soothe or because you're good at mass dispelling bursting or because of this or that, right? Like, if you're playing a DPS class, you want to be there because you're doing big damn. Like, you don't want to be the one demon hunter in the raid because you give chaos brand and yeah, you're 12th on the meters in every fight, but oh, you chaos brand. Like, that doesn't make anybody happy. It doesn't make the demon hunters happy. It doesn't make anyone else
Well,
happy.
even in the argument, yeah, this is just, I mean, this is actually a good swap in topic, but it also, the argument you're making is like, oh, it doesn't make the demon hunter feel good that he's getting brought in for chaos brand. Sure, but even in the case where he does, it would be a net neutral anyway, because think about all the classes that are not in because they don't just RNG roll, have some random fucking buff that makes everyone stronger, right? I wanted to ask you guys that specifically because I know how raid buffs affect raiding environments, and I think there's a lot of negatives there. But in a 5-man group, how often do you guys think about what classes you bring and have the raid buffs they bring be important? Do you think it makes sense that it's very restrictive into like what you can bring? That includes lust as well, and the reason why is they made an active choice in this expansion to make those things more exclusive. They removed scrolls, they nerfed drums, right? They made it so it was even more important that you had just exactly that class that had a button that someone else didn't. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah,
I think it's more restrictive actually than
from a healer perspective. I think not just from us, like look, we all play the game a bunch of hours a day. I can make whatever character, like if that's the good character, right? It doesn't matter to me, but if you're a person, let's say you're playing Mistweaver in a 15 or you're playing, Disc Priest or something, like, well, the group leader is probably some crap spec that doesn't bring anything because he's not getting invited, so he's making his own group, right? And then he just invites whoever that gets in, and it's like, well, okay, well, we need our healer to have lust because we don't have lust, and it's like, well, I would say as a shaman, you probably have like 5 times the success rate of getting into a group as like almost any other healer. And it's like, well, I think that whole idea, while for us, that's actually, I think, more of a problem for
that's a drums problem, right? Like that's not even a lust class problem because like yeah, was that the case in BF? Like I swear people just drums that shit and didn't give a fuck.
Well, they nerfed drums, right? So they made drums was, I believe, like 5/6 as effective in BFA, and now it's half or something like that, or maybe even less.
It's dog shit now.
So I think with class buffs and Mythic Plus, I don't know if Dorki agrees, but I think either remove them completely, or if they have them, give us a way to replace them so that you know what I mean, like you don't have any class that feels needed in every single group.
I don't even feel like it's class buffs though. In M Plus specifically, there are so many other things you have to consider, like disease dispel, curse dispel, how many AoE stops you have, having tricks or not, because like there are a lot of classes that are so bad because they have no way of displacing their threat. Like Havocs, for example. Havocs do a quarter of the damage of a Destro Lock, but they'll rip aggro before the Destro Lock does. That's how fucked up it is right now in the game we play.
I mean, it's also just that there's 36 specs in this game, and all specs aren't created equal. And I don't really... Maybe they can address that with the new talent trees, because like there are just classes in this game that do nothing other than DPS, and there are classes that do that, have Roar, Innervate, are extremely tanky, and have the only spread out AoE in the entire game because they nerfed everyone's dots. You know what I mean? Like there are just extreme outliers there, and that probably, I'm assuming, I mean, Moonkins were about for a lot of this expansion. I imagine that was like pretty important because I feel like every bit of utility you can shove into a 5-man group actually really matters. Like you actually use that a lot. I wonder if that is something they could look at in the future to try to make things a little bit more equal in that regard. Because a lot of people Mythic Plus, although a lot of stuff also transfers like PvP and stuff.
It's hard because I get what they're trying to do. Like, that's the same thing with Covenants, right? Like, we all saw Covenants coming, what was going to be wrong with it. But at the same time, like, I kind of saw what they were trying to do, right? And I kind of see what they're trying to do with the class-specific stuff, too. But it's like, well, they have to have such care with the way that they design things in dungeons to make something feel good that you have it, but not necessary. And I feel like the way that the average person who's doing anything in a video game, it feels like, I don't know, maybe it feels like this from reading chats or whatever, but it feels like everyone is just all or nothing, right? Like if there's something, it's either A, you need it in every single dungeon group and it's quote unquote viable or meta or S tier or whatever.
That's
or
not WoW's problem though.
It's bad, right? Yeah, it's not WoW specific. It's like everything. It's all gaming.
Gamers
like,
in 2022.
It's so hard to design something in that middle ground, right? Like how do you make, like, okay, let's say we have a druid versus a priest, and the druid can dispel curses, but the priest can dispel diseases. How do we make that feel good but not necessary? And I don't necessarily have a way, right? It's just very tough. In a raid setting, it feels good because, okay, let's have a little bit of everything, right?
Well, it's more, I think it's less the actual class balance. I actually truly think, let's just say you had like a meta 5-man comp at like a super high key level, and that's what like multiple groups were running because it was just that much better.
There is one right now.
Sure, but just imagine there was like multiple other options at every single position that were very close, especially in different dungeons. I think you would see 25 plus groups experiment with those mid to late season and actually get a lot of play. But the actual people who think like this, the people who are making, you know, Mythic Plus YouTube videos, the people who are like inviting people to their 15s, their minds will never actually be changed unless it's like the exact best comp. And that's not to do, I really don't think that's a tuning problem. I think it's just the way a lot of, you know, like people who get their opinions from 5-minute single target sims or tier lists unironically, like that's just how people play games now. And I don't think that's as much about tuning. That being said, I'm sure there's some totally fucking busted shit in Mythic Plus, and there are classes that aren't even fucking remotely close. I can almost guarantee you, I bet I know who they are, right? But I think even if it was really close, you'd have almost the exact same problem.
I agree.
I don't know if I would agree with that though.
Okay.
I feel like, because I mean, for me personally, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are similar. If you had like a pool of quote unquote S tier classes, I'm sure what most people think is, all right, so I don't like these two specs. I don't like Rogue. I don't like Hunter. But I mean, there is Mage, which is maybe 5% weaker, so I'll pick that one, and I'm sure that'll be fine. I feel like Lost Ark is an example. When I play Lost Ark, I don't really give a fuck about what I invite. It's just like, all right, let me just check the engraving and item level. I'll just invite this person real quick. But in World of Warcraft, I feel like I need certain specs.
Yeah, dude.
Like, right now, we need warlocks.
Dude, can I blow your mind real quick about that, like the needing
I
warlocks?
need a 1370 Argos, by the way.
How much? Oh, is that just like a shout out to all stream viewers, just in case? just like get in there. I already did all that this week. I would be down to game with you guys in Lost Ark, though. I just got my guy back up. Here's the question: if WoW did not have damage meters like Lost Ark does, would you have the same opinion?
I love that you said that, because while Dorki was talking about Lost Ark, that was literally exactly what I was thinking. And from playing Lost Ark, my opinion sort of shifted in that. My chat, look, everyone in your chat's going to type Madge when I say this. I think the game is better without damage meters. I think damage meters aren't healthy for the game. I feel like, number one, it makes the average player more toxic. And number two, I think it makes people focus on the wrong things. Instead of doing the boss fight, they just focus on, let me just karate chop my keyboard as hard as they can.
Well,
and
so,
I
you're
know
right.
It's true. Everyone
right.
loves the damage meters, and they try and spout some random nonsense about, oh yeah, I'm really into personal improvement, and I love seeing details because it helps me get better. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You just want to see details. You want to see your name at the top. You want to see who's at the bottom so that you can call them bad. You want to see your name at the top so that after you fail the boss fight, you can be like, well, I was top damage. That team was bad. I actually think that a majority of the reason that in Lost Ark you feel that way and in WoW you don't is because of damage meters. And if you go into 10 Guardian raids and in 3 of those Guardian raids you have a Scrapper who does tank damage, well, okay, I'm never going to invite a Scrapper again for the rest of my life, you know? But
no,
I have
you're
no idea,
100% right. So I think there's multiple levels to this, and it's extremely psychological, and I think we need much more time playing a popular game without damage meters to like really get a good feel for it. But you're absolutely right. I mean, and also people would argue like, well, no, it's because Lost Ark is balanced. Holy fuck, no, it's not.
Cap.
If you
Big cap.
if you were to actually see damage meters in that game, people's opinions of like class balance would be totally different. It'd be very similar to WoW. It would be, oh, I'm not inviting this class. Absolutely. Where now it's kind of assumed because there's some really popular like theory crafters that like will tell you that, and there's like a general idea. But no, like it does definitely like majorly change your stuff. The thing is like, I mean, I would like a damage meter in Lost Ark, but it's because I'm the kind of person who, I'm assuming a lot of people are like this, where they actually have a lot of fun optimizing and making sure they can do as much as possible in an encounter, and like one-upping yourself and like doing a guardian raid and be like, holy fuck, I've never done 10k on this boss before, and like that I'm getting better and stuff like that.
Even
like,
Max is spouting it. Look, see, I told you guys would do it.
Wait,
told you guys
hold
would
up,
do it.
hold up. But what a lot of people do is they don't really do that, and they just use it as like an exclusionary thing, and they use it to like put other classes down, or like just in the whole like 2020 and onwards metagamey thinking of like, this class is irrelevant and can't be used and is bad. Like, I really think is if in WoW there was no logs and there was nothing, like you would see people queuing up for 15s and inviting a fucking wide array of classes, despite how many people post public information about exactly how much damage these classes are doing. I think that's objectively true.
I think that talking about getting rid of the damage meter is more of like treatment rather than a cure. Like it only, the only reason why it would be beneficial to get rid of the damage meter is basically admitting that it is too hard to balance the underlying game. Like because it wouldn't be a problem if you didn't have survival and lock, and like it wouldn't be a problem if you had classes that are doing literally 2 or 3 times more damage than the other classes, right? If everybody was around the same ballpark, it wouldn't be like, oh, that guy did 100 more DPS than me. I guess I'm never inviting another warlock again, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So two more things. WoW is too far gone for them to ever remove a damage meter. This is all theoretical. They would absolutely never do that. Yeah, it's more like even your perception though. Like I think I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, there's no answer, right? No, I agree with you, right?
Well, the answer would
You
be
can't-
No, sorry.
Damage
It was about tuning. Even like tuning though in WoW, like yeah, you're right, but I just think WoW has like shoehorned itself into this like weird ass spot where it's kind of the problems with the game too, because I feel like the reason everyone played WoW in 2005 and 2010 was so much more unified, whereas now there's like people that could play this game all day every day right now for like, I'm not kidding, like probably almost 10 reasons, and there's like that many things you can do in the game that are like totally separate from everything else. And back then I feel like everyone kind of dabbled in everything. Games weren't as like precise. Now that the gaming industry is better, people can play games that are like fucking IV to the veins, like exactly what they want. It's just that WoW is in this position now where they're tuning and making this. I'll get to my point, by the way. This will all come back to what we were talking about. Where, you know, they're kind of just still trying to make a game and keep everyone happy, which is impossible. But like, instead of just kind of picking a lane. So that's the same thing with class balance. I feel like with there being Mythic Plus, rating, and PvP that are all really popular, the reason why you have Destrolocks and Survival Hunters and in the past Windwalkers and Frost Mages, and why you can't have that many specs is this game's just been out for 20 years, man. And there's 36 fucking specs, and they've decided to tackle not the Final Fantasy and rating 95% of what you see as single target. If that was the case in WoW, if 95% of what you saw in a raid or any like relevant content was single target, classes would be balanced in 2 seconds. Like if that's all you had to do, but classes can just do a million different things. 2 target, 3 target, mass AoE, and like AoE cap, as you're mentioning, threw a big wrench in that, because some classes like yours just are, and some classes like the ones you're mentioning just aren't. But I think this game will never be balanced in that sense, because what you have to balance for and what every class can or can't do without majorly homogenizing the game, it'll always be fucked, because it's a logistical like nightmare. It's a disaster. You can't. It's probably impossible, actually.
Well, I mean, even if it's impossible, I feel like they can definitely improve on it. I feel like one of the biggest things they can do is to just put out more frequent patches. I mean, we literally only get balancing for the first month or two, heroic week tuning, and then maybe a little bit afterwards, and then it's just completely silent until the next patch. And like one of the easiest fixes, I'm not even asking for like a complete cure, like JPC was saying, like just by simply doing small tuning passes every week or two, that would be a massive step up already.
Yeah.
There are some classes that are just obvious outliers. You know, right now it's survival hunters and warlocks. If you put them down like 5% every single week until they're like pretty okay, I don't see any major issues with that.
No,
Obviously, you know, they're tuned more towards like uncapped AoE, and they might be a little bit weak on single target, but I'm sure they can do something
If you look at
in between.
Destrolock's even top in the logs on Rygolon.
okay, well that's
That thing does everything.
no, they're bugged.
Yeah, that's different reason.
That's a yeah, they're definitely bugged, but no, I think they can. I think in general, just having more frequent updates to tuning instead of just trying to balance it all around like 0.5 and 0.1s and 0.2s. I think just having more frequent updates would be good. Like I even went over earlier on stream and I looked at like all the legendaries. Like we were talking about just what Shadowlands legendaries were as a system compared to some things in the past, and like was it a success or not. And I think some of the things were fun to use and people use them, but like 70% of the legendaries they made, time they spent making, developers spent making these items, never got used ever. One time they didn't get used at all. The same ones were like this the whole expansion. And they like how is there not someone there buffing completely unused legendaries every 2 weeks until it's just too good, and then just nerf it a little more so it's at least a choice you make. And you could make the same argument for talents, for Mythic Plus participation, right? The only real answer to that is that they're understaffed or they're just prioritizing other things, or they're just on a schedule to pump out an expansion every 2 years and they don't have enough people or enough time to work on things like that. It's the only two options, I think.
Yeah,
That's
I feel
what I
like
think,
they're. Yeah, it definitely feels like they either are understaffed. Also, like sort of from my perspective, it kind of feels like they're almost scared. Like they every time I hear and again, this might be totally made up from Ian or whoever's doing these interviews, but they always talk about how like guilds are progressing on bosses and they don't want to like do tuning while guilds are progressing, and like
No shot. That doesn't matter.
You don't think so? I mean, I agree with you, right?
No.
I
No, I'm saying like to them that doesn't matter.
You don't
like,
think so? Well, so another thing too
can't,
is some
right?
of these borrowed power systems also, again, right, borrowed power Madge. The problem is the acquisition, right? And so, for example, talking about legendaries, that was a great example where, yeah, all these legendaries there's so many of them that actually could have changed your gameplay and made things interesting, but what's going to happen then? What's going to happen if they take these legendaries that aren't used and make them better? Well, people are going to be mad, right? They're going to be like, I just made my legendary because it costs 50K and it cost me
then have a
Soul Ash
system
and
in
I
the
have to-"
game that makes it so you can refund it like they already
right on.
do.
No, I completely
Yeah.
agree, right? I completely agree with you, but I feel like they're also sort of stepping on their own feet in that problem of they create these systems that have this red tape or like artificial gating or problems with them, and then they can't, it's harder for them to balance them because it's like, well, you know, like for Covenants, for example, right? It's like, well, people...
yeah, they put themselves in that scenario.
Right, well, exactly, right? Exactly.
Well, at least their philosophy is changing. Like, clearly, like, I don't know if you guys
Is
have
it
talked...
changing? Look, be honest right now. Do you think it's changing, or do you think we're going to get the same stuff
I think from what... I think from what...
Copium.
Yeah, I feel like from everything they've done in 9.5 to 9.2, specifically in regards to like Covenants and how account-wide and alt-friendly this patch is, was something they stated they wanted to do. This is the first time they've released a major patch and actually had those things in from the start. The creation catalyst was clearly too late, but I think as time goes on, I'm a little bit more convinced that that was more of like a Season 4 feature than to give you tier faster in this patch, which I think all of us can agree that people got tier too slow this patch, so that could have been solved by multiple things, but especially the jailer tier thing. But
yeah, it makes me good that you say that though, because I'm a guy who's new to WoW, right? You mentioned it, so I don't know. I hear these people who've been playing WoW for 10 years who are like, well, yeah, here we go again. And I hope, right? I hope that Blizzard fixes these things, and that's how I feel. But so it makes me feel good to hear someone who's played the game for this long and paid attention to also think that thing.
I really just pay attention to what they say and what they do. And like what they say and their like philosophy, a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's corporate lawyer speak." Like, no, they usually give you a pretty good idea into what they're thinking. And like I like listen to that announcement. I would not have guessed that they would have chosen to not come up with new system X and just be like, you know what, we're just going to take all of the underlying systems in this game and just make them better. And I think that is the absolute best thing they could possibly do to the game. I'm sure a lot of you guys agree, but that's something that like what they're doing and saying right now about that is it follows along with that, and it's also following the same line of thinking from 9.1.5. So that's why I'm a little, because like, dude, going into BFA it was totally different, man. They actually didn't even communicate with anyone going into BFA like they did going into Shadowlands. Obviously that communication kind of didn't matter, and we told them all this stuff and then they didn't do it, and then they ended up doing it eventually. Same problem as before. But like, this is the first time their philosophy has clearly shifted, and you just hope that they continue designing that. But back onto the talent thing though. You were saying like, oh, well, Blizzard's saying, oh, we don't want to make changes to these legendaries and these talents because, you know, people are in the middle of progression. Dude, in WoW currently, someone's always in the middle of progression. Always. Literally every minute from the second the season starts until it ends. And no way you buffing... I'm just trying to think of just some unused dog shit legendary that some DPS class has. You buffing that class or every other class's worst legendary by 10% for the 4th time, and it becomes the legendary they use on progression that week. That's fine. Do they maybe like kill a boss they wouldn't have? Sure, but like that's the shit. Good, fuck yeah, and then nerf it a little bit, whatever. But at least for that week they played a little bit differently and they thought about stuff differently. That's like kind of what this whole thing we've been talking about is like, you want to do that as much as possible. But it is an extreme amount of work more than what they're doing now, because they're basically not doing it at all. They basically are just like, what talents suck, or what class stuff sucks every like 5 months, and then they change it. That's like a huge change into how they look at designing the game. Are you guys super down on that? That's actually interesting. I'm
a little skeptical that you say that people wouldn't. I feel like, I'm not saying it's not the right path, but to say that to make the best legendary for your class, even if it's literally only by 0.5%, I think people would be super mad about that. Can you imagine? Just think about the average Moonkin. Just think about the average Moonkin.
The only reason that they're mad is because they're so expensive. Why are they so expensive? Because of a drop rate on an epic item that drops from Xerath Bonus, right? Or a legendary, whatever. You could just tune that knob so that they're way cheaper, and people wouldn't freak the fuck out whenever you change their best legendary, right? So it's like I don't think if you imagine that all legendaries were completely free, I don't think anybody would care at all.
Sure, no, I agree, but also then that's a big step for them to make, and I hope they make that, because I think WoW in current year, it isn't classic WoW, right? It isn't. You don't sit here and you don't go out to the farm and you don't chop wood and then sell it on the auction house and then find the blacksmith of Ogrimmar and get him to enchant your gloves or whatever. Like that, it's just not the same game that it was.
This is actually totally different, because I think the reason they had the cost of profession-related stuff so expensive in this expansion, it might have just been too high in general, but it was clearly to give relevance to professions. Right?
I think it's going to be even higher next expansion.
Dude, well, next expansion is a totally different thing, because I don't know if you like listened to at least the interview, the Hazelnutty one I just listened to. Like, the way he was talking about professions, man, they're trying something extremely ambitious that is like totally different than anything ever before. You're going to be like the only dude in your guild that can craft like the blacksmithing helm that, from what he was saying, like professions don't stop at pre-raid eye level. Like they're gonna you're gonna be able to craft shit that's like fucking wild. Like you're gonna be able to craft like mythic eye level shit eventually, but you're gonna have to spend a lot of time and resources, and it's very specialized.
So it's gonna be pay to win, right? That people are not gonna like that.
Oh,
I went on a huge
that could be
rant on my stream about this, by the way. But unless the high level profession stuff is cosmetic only, if they make player power gated by a large amount of grind through professions or gold, right? Either way, either you buy them out of the auction house with gold. I mean, how is that different from legendaries? How is that different from all the stuff that people have complained about the whole expansion?
Other than people have to do their own professions, yeah. I mean, it's basically
nobody wants to do anything in a while. Everyone wants to log on, clear the raid one time, and then be stronger than everybody else in their dungeon group. That's what people want. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like what they're trying to do is they're like, professions in this game have been an actual just complete side thought for a long time, and they want people to like log in and be profession people. Like I can actually play WoW and just be a fucking blacksmith, but I would have to. I think what you're doing is you're trying to imagine current professions right now, but just making things more exclusive and like harder to get, which was like a problem with why things are more expensive this time, and trying to just transplant that in the next expansion. But let me give an addendum to my statement, okay? I think that's cool.
I think that's cool. I love the idea of logging on and I grind some sort of blacksmithing stuff, and maybe I do some crazy hard blacksmithing dungeon or some super long quest that I'm working on for 2 months. And then when I walk into the town, when I walk into Dragonville or whatever the town's called, I don't know, everyone sees me and my armor is freaking glowing and everyone's like, holy crap, that guy's the blacksmith of the server, right? I think that's cool as shit. I personally, but here's the problem.
I think
right?
it's gonna be impossibly hard for them to pull that off. Too.
I'm that guy. You know the South Park World of Warcraft, that really fat guy that just lays there and does nothing all day and lives in his mom's basement. That's me, right? So that system's great for me, but for the average person who wants to log in, they're gonna show up to raid and they're gonna be like, well, I don't have this blacksmithing stuff, and holy crap, this cost 500,000 gold on the auction house because it took this guy 3 months of grinding, and only this fat guy from South Park has the recipe to the blacksmithing thing, and I have to pay him 500,000 gold. They're gonna hate that, right? And they're gonna write angry posts. Look, I enjoy the system. I think it's cool, right? The idea of Lost Ark, for instance, of grinding a bunch of alts and farming to your main and like putting in all this work, I love it, right? But that's because I'm me and I'm not the average person, and I actually think that while it's a very tough line. And my solution, and I talked about this on stream to wrap it up real quick, but my solution is all of the things that come from the very high level professions need to be cosmetic only. They can be super cool, they can be super expensive, they can be super rare. I think they should be cosmetic only. And if you put player power, you're basically what you're saying is people, if they grind, they can create mythic BOEs. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, well, maybe not right away, right? Like I think if regardless of what they do, if they make it so you can just assemble a fucking like I can have I can send out contracts to fucking crafters and like have, you know, a team of 20 to 30 crafters that is just going to craft everyone in my guild full mythic items on day one of the raid, and like they have to, like, yeah, that's a problem. But that
doesn't matter. Well, here's the thing, right? This is you, right? You're thinking about week 1 versus week 3 because you're, you know, this is.
I mean, even week 3, like I think if anyone is buying multiple items of like mythic, I mean, okay, first of all, let's just say, even using your argument of mythic BOEs. If mythic BOEs right now did not exist and there were just the exact same amount of them that existed, but they were just from crafters, would that matter at all? It'd be the same thing. And if they can just make it so you can only wear like 1 or 2 of them and you use it to fill a slot and you have to find someone, and the person who happens to make legs is like, fuck yeah, this season there's no legs that drop off of early bosses, so I'm making dollars. That's fine. Obviously, if you can outfit your entire character in fucking blacksmith or leather worker gear, then that's bad.
How many professions are there?
Or even if you can make mythic armor right away, right?
But how many professions are there?
I have no like
right?
in general, I have no clue. Probably like 10. I don't know.
Right. So even if every profession could only make one thing, right? Only one thing of mythic quality. Well, then what happens? And look, I'll also agree that my take is pretty cynical, and I agree with what you're saying that if they craft it with, for lack of a better word, with some love and care, and they really think about how it affects everything and the quantity of it, yeah, it could be great, right? It could be great. But just based off of what I've seen so far in the last few years of playing WoW, I don't really have that much faith in that being the case.
Yeah, I think by the way, I think you and every other WoW player that is like, I don't care what they say at all, I will believe it when I see it. I think that's perfectly rational, by the way. I actually, I think that as well. But I think we're going to have to like kind of give them that feedback so this kind of stuff doesn't happen. I really, just thinking about the prospects of this, it's such an entirely different thing to the game. It's actually like low-key one of the biggest things they're adding ever if they're trying to make every profession that relevant, and mentioning that, you know, maybe this won't even matter. Maybe the amount of time it would take either through weekly caps or time investment or whatever to be able to make a mythic item, it might be 6 weeks after, you know, the thing even comes out. Like, I'm trying to imagine a system where it's like, you know, 6 weeks after the mythic raid is out, a lot of people who are doing cutting edge stuff by the end of the thing have only killed 5 bosses, but they have a decent amount of mythic gear through their vault and whatever else, and they have like 2 bind on whatever, like you can only have 2 of them equipped of like anything from blacksmithing, leatherworking, or jewel crafting or whatever, and they chose to like have a really high level, like mythic eye level ring and a helm. I don't think that's bad for the game, and I think that makes professions way more relevant if it's specialized. I just think it's about finding the middle ground of where that is. But to answer your question, I don't think being cynical is bad. I think Blizzard has certainly earned the right for people to be cynical.
Yeah, and I'll shut up just because I've been talking too much, and I'm sure Dorki and JPC have way smarter takes than me. But at the same time, you know, like player housing was a big talk about in Dragonlands or whatever the new expansion is. And here's the thing: is these sort of in horizontal progression ideas, right? These I don't want to push Mythic Plus or PvP or raid, but I want to be logged into the game and do fun stuff. So for instance, professions, right? This could be something cool, right? They could do something well, and this is something that the game needs. The game needs something that if you want to log on and play for 2 or 3 hours and progress your character and feel good about what you just did, it needs those things. And I hope professions are them. And I think to say, you know, everyone said player housing copium. They're never going to make player housing what it is in Final Fantasy and some other games, right? They just don't have the engine.
Well, without 4 years of development.
Well, exactly,
as well,
right? But maybe, you know, maybe this profession thing could be the answer. You know, maybe every whatever amount of time that you choose, you log on and you can actually make meaningful progression towards your profession. And after maybe it takes 4 months, but then you can create these mythic level items with tertiaries, and they're crazy. And yeah, you might only be able to equip a couple of them, but I mean, I hope it's good.
What do the rest of you guys think about just kind of some stuff in the expansion in general, not even Mythic Plus related, but like talent system? At least for me, this is probably true for at least all PvE. I'm certainly PvP players too, but I feel like the second they release alpha, I could spend an entire week fucking around with those talent trees. I feel like that's one of the coolest things that they've put in the game in like an insanely long time. Like I'm pretty sure even if that was like a new system that was just extra, that would be insane. It's like the best mixture of talents. It almost feels like an artifact weapon kind of too. Like it's really good.
I'm for sure most excited about the talents. Like thinking about all the different like situations. Like, oh well, you know, I could use this in this type of scenario. Maybe like whether it's survivability or mobility or like a damage profile. Like how many targets you're hitting, which spec you're playing. I'm really excited to see all those for sure.
When do you think Dragon Town is coming out?
I think 2022 is a little ambitious. I think I would rather see. I mean, at the end of the day, they're probably going to do what's best for the shareholders, right? But I would rather see it come out in a great state, and like because I feel like they're on the right trajectory, going from 9.1 to 1.5 to 9.2, and I think Season 4 Shadowlands will be pretty good. Like 9.2.5 will be pretty good. I'd rather see it continue to go in that direction. Maybe it's delayed a quarter or however long it takes, right? However long it takes, how long it takes. Then them just push it out and then...
I don't even think they're going to Giga delay it. I just think even at this point, like they announced Shadowlands at November of 2019, and it came out November 2020. It took like an entire year after the announcement, but then they actually gave us a date. This time they didn't give us a date. So it took a year of that time. That was before Nyalotha even released, and the beta came out like 3 or 4 months after the announcement. So I think Season 4 is probably... I mean, if this is like a normal amount of time to get cutting edge for Sepulture, doesn't that mean Season 4 comes out like end of summer? And if that's the case, there's no fucking way the expansion's coming out in November, right? Like, I mean, the time... Like, as much as I think Blizzard and everyone's like caricature in their mind of like greedy Bobby and like money signs everywhere trying to like force a 2022 end of year, which I initially was thinking release, there's actually no fucking way. Like it has to be like around February or March of the next year at the very earliest, I think.
I think that's a good time too, like right after everybody gets back from the holidays and everything's settled.
Are you guys excited for Season 4, by the way? I know we kind of talked about this earlier, dude. I think Season 4 is gonna be fucking sick. I think it's gonna be like maybe so good that they basically do this at the end of every expansion, even if it's just like a 2 months before pre-patch situation of just bringing back all of the raids from the expansion on a 1 week per raid basis, rotating them and like kind of just fucking changing them around a little bit. I think it's fucking, at least for raids, it seems like it probably a concept that would have worked a lot in the past. It's really cool. I don't know about Mythic Plus though.
I'm for sure actually more excited about the raid angle than the M plus angle, and like I'm a big M plus guy, so I'm really excited to see what's up.
Wait, what is Mythic? Okay, so Mythic Plus is the mega dungeon from this expansion, 2 dungeons, the mega dungeon from last expansion, and then Karazhan. So that's 6 dungeons that are all mega dungeons, and then what else?
2 community voted on WAD dungeons.
Oh, and that's Grimrail and the other one, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the other one is.
I feel like Grimrail's going to be...
Docks, I think it was.
Grimrail's going to be... Okay, Iron Docks is going to be sick in Mythic Plus. I feel like Grimrail's an actual disaster for most Mythic Plus affixes, but I guess we'll figure that out when we get there. Even though Grimrail was an all-time great key, but that was more of challenge mode angle, not trying to imagine dealing with Sanguine in those train cars. That sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, people were doing those in like 3 minutes. Even less, actually.
All right, fuck yeah. I think that's it. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about? You're passionate about the expansion, some other shit? I feel like we covered it all. It was really fun.
With the whole crafting thing, I feel like, if anything, they just need more side progressions or side in-game progressions. I feel like the better way to approach the whole crafting is to just have their own little end game where you're just building towards crafting some super epic armor set that lets you, gather stuff faster. And with
that's already going to be in. They already said that, like basically you're going to be able to like farm for like fishing gear, and like whenever you fish, your character will have like a fishing armor set that just exists on your guy. So I feel like that's already going to be there.
Like just making all the progression stuff work towards other progressions rather than working towards PvP or M+ or raid. Because that way it doesn't really impact.
They have to, right?
Well, why
because,
though?
Because like if they're not implementing the major thing they've done in the last couple expansions has been like the thing they've announced at BlizzCon or at the like whatever event. That system ended up being what contributed a lot of your time and resource, and it was all player power related, and everything surrounding it was building into your player power. And at least, okay, maybe there'll be a system like this, but those were all announced at the expansion, and those were like the thing, and it all revolved around that. I feel like with their thing being, we're just going to make the UI better, and the whole thing in this expansion is just going to be like this talent thing. We're just going to make this talent system fucking own. There really is no, like, everything you do is progression that makes your character stronger. So I feel like they're going to have to make a bunch of horizontal systems, right? Like, they have to. There's no other option. The professions seem like one of them, but I feel like what you'll see in alpha and beta is that they're gonna be like, okay, now we have this talent system that's great, like what else are people gonna do at max level? And hopefully they're learning that, we just want to do shit that's fun and not stuff you have to do. Like, dude, just imagine if Torghast could have ever just been something you never had to do as a chore, and they just they could have made that shit like insanely mage towery, regardless of like cosmetic rewards. You could have given it rewards, but think about how cool Torghast could have been if they could have actually made it hard.
Yeah, that's something that having... So the biggest problem with all these systems is you don't actually play your class. Like, as a DPS player, you're constantly like having to self-heal and like worry about survival. As a healer or a tank, you're having to constantly worry about doing the thing that you don't want to do, like doing damage or whatever. But I feel like they need to make like a Mage Tower-esque system pretty much for every expansion that specifically teaches you your spec or your role. That way, like, okay, you go in and you're a healer, and this is a healer challenge. And again, this might be a healer-only problem, right? But then, like, as a DPS player, you shouldn't have to worry about, like, slamming your defensives and, like, bringing a bunch of leech and, like, trying to keep yourself alive. Like, you should just be worried about, like, okay, this is a challenge where you just have to, like, blast as much damage as possible in this 20-second window. Or, I think they should really, like, they keep doing these things like Torghast or, like, Visions or, like, Warfronts in every single expansion, but it should literally just be, like, Mage Tower-esque challenges that teach you your spec, and then that way you sort of have, for those people who want a more single player experience but they still want to sort of challenge and develop their own character, I think they should really have that.
Dude, there's gonna be dragon races. I just realized that.
Okay, also, what's the deal with the flying? So they showed off all the flying in the trailer. What do you do when you're flying? Like, is there like
all right, think of it like this. You jump off a super high cliff, you go down, you get momentum, you pull up in the air, and you just flap your fucking wings for a bit, slowly losing momentum as you go, and then you will stop going fast, and then you will like land and have to do it again. No, or
so
I mean,
or that's the feature.
Well, no.
Glider?
It's hard to
when you put it that way, I know that's good.
It's hard.
I'm just thinking, like, dude, are they
think about it that way? That's pretty
cool. Dude, it actually looks sick.
races or like some like?
Oh,
what do
there's
they-
gonna be races for
You
sure.
think so? Okay,
Absolutely.
See, like,
That's
feel
what I was
like
saying.
maybe you have
100%.
a lot more faith in them than I do, but like they didn't showcase anything that you do when you're flying. They made it like the big selling point of the expansion is that you can fly, and it's
It
like,
looks fucking sick. And the reason why they're not, they also said they're not letting you use your flying mounts in those zones because if you could just fly normally, like they designed all those zones clearly. So there's like high peaks that you go down. There's going to be like exploration things you can do by being good at dragon riding to where you can actually get things, you can actually go farther. I'm sure throughout the expansion you can make your little dragon like go farther or have like stronger wings or whatever the fuck. But if you had the ability to actually fly, which I think like some people were mad about, but you can use all your mounts just on the ground. I feel like people are going to want to use their dragon because you can like customize it. You have your own dragon, I guess. And then like it would like trivialize what you can actually do and how cool dragon riding would be if you could just manually fly anywhere you would need to otherwise try to actually get to by like learning when to like pull up and stuff and like do spins and shit. I feel like there's a lot they could do with that. I think it'd be really fun. Like it looks fun as fuck. Like look at the, I think it was like, I wish I could find the video for it where they were like originally showing that off. You can see that like if you would have like pulled up a little bit earlier, you wouldn't have gone as far. And like the zones are actually designed for you to have to do that well to get places, which looks cool.
Based off the trailer, now that I'm thinking about it, I do have a little bit of a hard time believing that it's more efficient than a Goblin Glider for most high altitude to low altitude trajectories. Now that I'm thinking about it, because in the trailer, right, like almost all of the momentum is straight down, and then it goes out, and like yeah, you're going really fast, but I don't think you're actually unless you're like I don't know. If
They
the
said
dragon
it was
just,
like way
goes
faster
away.
than flying. Like you're able to go much farther.
Okay, maybe it is. Yeah, I don't know.
Also, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, if it ever turns into like, it would be a mistake if it was like, oh man, it turns out we don't really care about riding our dragons because the correct thing to do is just a goblin glider everywhere. I mean, that would obviously be stupid, right?
Yeah,
Like that. Like obviously, if their feature is you do something more more boring or less fun than a goblin glider, then that system or feature sucks anyway, right? Like everyone's just gonna get insanely bored of that. But if you can actually just fucking fly around and like go super far distances and you're constantly interacting with it for every quest or getting across the zone to do, I'm assuming like world quests if they do it, like I think it's just definitely going to be sick. I think it's gonna be really good. That's
Dude,
it
we're
though.
gonna have raids in M+ where you have to test your dragon riding skill.
Yep, I already said there's gonna be a
I can see
dragon
it.
riding boss. You're gonna
Oh man,
for sure. Yeah,
that's gonna
for
be
sure.
sick actually.
I know. That's what I'm
It's gonna
saying.
be like that, the first boss in Trial of Crusade, except the dragon riding.
It was the same reason why before Sanctum was announced or the bosses were talked about, you knew for a fact, or sorry, after they announced Sanctum, before you knew the bosses, you knew there was going to be an anima power boss. And you were just like, fuck, I hope it's not a hard one because that sounds like a nightmare. But then it ended up actually being really good. And it was the first boss. But yeah, you better believe the first boss of some raid, we are flying around on some dragons. That is a guarantee. All right, anyways, that's it. Thanks for the time, guys. That was actually really fun. We should do this again
hell
in the
yeah.
future.
Yep.
Anytime, dude.
Yep.
Thanks,
All right.
Max.
Thanks
Yep.
for inviting us.
Yep.
Good night.
All right. Fuck yeah. That was fun. That was I'm actually really glad I did that.